we're back again this week in this series of podcasts that I've done with Laurie Morgen, where we've looked at different aspects of life with disabilities and what that means in real world sense and in the current society. So Laurie, if you're not aware, is an expert on autism. She's an autistic person, and she's also a published author. She has her book out available now. It's available on Amazon. It's called Travelling by Train, and it's the story of an autistic mother. First question, or the first area that we'd look at, is around what is autism and what are the common misconceptions and misinformation that people have around autism as a condition.
So my experiences aren't unique. It might be a similar situation, different place, but it's the kind of instances that are commonly found in autistic people. I think in the context that we're talking, we're going to be mostly talking about people who are probably willing and able to work, to use the education system, to independently access facilities. Therefore, we don't necessarily need to have somebody going with us. What autism is, we have a different look on life. We look at situations in a different way. We very often look at the small detail rather than the bigger picture. So it might be hard for us to see the consequences of our actions. And we do have issues where we can get distracted. It's very hard to focus on two things at once. A lot of us might have difficulty, for instance, looking and listening. So a child in the classroom may be thought to be being inattentive because they're not looking at the teacher, where in actual fact, if they looked at the teacher, they wouldn't be listening. But they'd be listening, but their eyes might be somewhere else. Their eyes might be on the ceiling, they might be looking out of the window. An example of this is that I had when my eldest son first started school. His teacher said to us on a parents' evening, he never looks as though he's paying attention, but you can't catch him out. You'll ask him a question and he'll know the answer straight away. And I had that said about my youngest son as well. He could give you verbatim exactly what the teacher had said, but he never looked as though he was paying attention. And very typically, if I'm driving somewhere, I can have the radio on, I can play music, I can be talking to the person next to me, that's fine. But when we're starting to get close to the destination, or I have to do stuff like approaching an island with changed lanes, I have to keep an eye on the road signs and all this sort of thing, I will have to turn the radio off. And I will have to say, look, don't talk to me, I need to concentrate. I would not be able to negotiate those manoeuvres with background noise going or somebody talking to me. But that sort of thing fairly typical. This in itself doesn't sound like massively unusual. You might think, so hey, what's the problem? The issues can be is that we're not always understood very well by people who don't have an awful lot of experience with autism. It might be that there are unwritten social rules. Is we have a problem A, B, C, and it's solved A, B, C. Now, if you're wired up to think in a different way, instead of looking at the problem like this, you might be looking at the problem like that. But the strength of it is that you're getting two different viewpoints. It's a bit like two different camera angles or stereo sound. You get a fuller experience. And this is one of the massively brilliant things about employing somebody who's autistic, as somebody with what we're starting to call now a form of neurodivergence. It's because we're not crowd followers. We're the odd ones out, we're the people on the periphery. We might not have great social skills, but we can do a fantastic job of work because we have got that, like we're looking at something from this angle, somebody else is looking at it from that angle.
And do you think that in workplaces and in society, but thinking about workplaces in general, do you think that there is enough of an understanding around autism and neurodiversity? Is there a need for organisations to think differently themselves?
From the feedback I get and the conversations I have with other people, there's a long, long, long way to go. Companies and organisations, as you'll know from your own experience, are very keen and willing to embrace diversity. And that diversity in the absolutely most diverse sense you can think of. We're looking at employing people with disabilities, fine, not a problem. We can put access ramps in. We can provide somebody with mobility or back issues with a special chair, or we can make provisions and understanding. We don't mind having people in the workplace, and we welcome people in the workplace who come from different ethnic backgrounds. But there seems to be a big stumbling block that pervades is employing autistic people. And I can only imagine that is a lot of the time because of the myths people have about it from the employment perspective. And that actually does play out in my own personal experience and in the experiences I've seen my family members have, and from what I've heard from other autistic people. Like I've heard stories from individuals who say, I've been working at my job for the same employer, same firm, same company for 20 years or so. And I got my autism diagnosis 6 months ago. And it answered a lot of questions for them. They told their employer, and they said it would help me to do my job better if they made certain adjustments for them. Like, could I have a desk, please, that's to one side of the room, so I don't have so many peripheral distractions. And I've heard of them saying, but the boss moved my desk to right in the middle of an open plan office where you've got a lot of background noise, telephones ringing, people walking by, and they have done that deliberately. Even though that employee has been there for 20 years, doing an amazing job with no issues whatsoever, they suddenly decide that it's okay to create an issue for that person. Now, that's unacceptable. There's a disproportionate high number of autistic people anyway, who are either underemployed or unemployed, and being able to retain a job once we get them also causes issues. Because although we're saying yes, we're welcoming to diversity and all this sort of thing, and on the job description, we're looking for an out-of-the-box thinker. We want somebody to bring fresh ideas to the team. That sounds perfect for the way an autistic person looks at things, because again, they're looking at an issue from this angle, somebody else is looking at it from this angle. You bring the ideas together, amazing. And for what's obvious to us is genius to somebody else. And they're thinking, why didn't I think of that? It's because we're different. That's the essential part and meaning behind diversity, because we're different. And people say, yes, we want this. Yes, we want a fresh pair of eyes. Yes, we want new talent in the talent pool. But so often the experience that an autistic person has is that they're the wrong kind of different.
And what would your message be in that case to employers that are looking to attract a more diverse workforce, that are looking to embrace that diversity of thought and different way of thinking, what would your message be to them in that case?
Well, you can't have one without the other. You can't expect to attract somebody who looks at an issue in a different way and not accept not accept their quirks, because that's essentially, we're a package. You cannot take the talent and then reject completely the fact that somebody might not appear to fit in with the rest of the team. They might not like chatting around the water cooler. They might feel really awkward. They might sit on their own in the staff restaurant. And why is that an issue? And I know people who've been let go from jobs because they don't seem to fit in with the rest of the team. And one guy I know, he's autistic, and he's a really good salesman. He got into car sales and he moved on to slightly different jobs. But one particular instance that I can think of that he moved to a new car dealership. And within a couple of weeks, he was the top salesman in the team. He'd spend all day on the phone, building up contacts, getting in touch with past customers, getting in touch with people who probably had the car for a year or two. Are you still happy with it? Is it still okay with you? It's been a while since you paid us a visit. Why don't you come in and look at the new models? All this sort of thing. But the other salesman, that rattled the cages a bit, because he was suddenly, had been there 2 weeks, highest earner, top salesman in the team, the new boy. And because he worked hard, and they let him go. You don't appear to fit in with the rest of the team. Now, this young man said to me, I don't want to fit in with the rest of the team, because all they do all day is they might make a few phone calls. They spend all day standing around the coffee machine talking about women and football. But because he was rattling the cage, instead of the manager saying, well, you guys, stop, come away from the coffee machine. I'm paying you to do a job. Get on your phones and you start doing as well as the guy over here. You kind of think, what is wrong with people? Who in their right mind would actually do that? It doesn't make sense.
So what would your message be then, or some tips that you would give to an organisation? Given the example you've just shared with us, and it's a really good example, but what would your tips be then for a business to be more inclusive and to embrace autistic people a little bit more? What are the sort of things that they can do? What are the sort of things that they might need to think about? And what should they do to prepare themselves for having that difference in the workplace?
The best thing anybody can do is to actually be interested. They say, okay, tell me about it. Tell me about you. What can you do? If you've got as far as an interview, or you're actually already in situ and you've been diagnosed late on, find out. It's not difficult. Find out what somebody's strengths are and find out what they're good at. If they already work for you, then you know. And just see how you can make life a bit more comfortable. If they're doing a really good job, then surely the most sensible thing would be to make life comfortable for them so they stay, because they're good for your business. And you cannot have that top performer, the guy with the amazing eye for detail who can spot an error in an instant, where it might take somebody else hours to do it. Then you cannot have both worlds. You got this person, you hired them for the talent. You need to accept the things that they're not so brilliant at. And if they're not great at socialising, why is that an issue?
Perhaps if we sort of flip that question back around a little bit, what are the sort of things then, so simple steps or things that an employer can do?
You're going to have to think ahead as an employer about how you recruit from the application process through to the interview situation. Now, a lot of the time autistic people might not see the relevance, for instance, of doing these team building games. I am not being employed to make deck chairs out of balloons, or how many paper cups I can get in my ears at one time, for instance. You know, make the interview relevant to the job role. If you're employing somebody to number crunch, like analyze endless streams of data, then get them to do it. Get to see how quickly and accurately they can do it. Give them a good practical tasks. Where's the problem here? How would you solve it? What do you want? Be specific as an employer. We need somebody who can do this, who can do this, who can do this. And that is exactly what you're looking for. Anything else, it does not matter. You have hired somebody to sit there and stare at endless lists of figures, numbers, or whatever. That is why they're there. And that's all that matters.
So would the message be then not to focus on culture fit, which I know some organisations have fallen foul of or been sort of criticised for focusing on culture fit and people that will fit in around here, and the message would be focus on the role and be very clear and specific of what your expectations are of that individual.
Yeah, you want somebody who's going to, let's take a practical example. If you want somebody who's going to paint your fence, it doesn't matter that they can't fix your leaky boiler. You want somebody for a specific task. I think as an employer, to get the best out of your autistic employee, you need to know exactly what you want them for. You need them for a specific role. Then you want them for that specific role. And how you communicate the workload to them is a completely different thing. I am not going to be able to go through every case scenario that I can possibly think of off the top of my head. If somebody needs to chat with me, then I would suggest just get in touch with me.
And what are the kind of things that you can do? Obviously, you said earlier on, if somebody is looking for information about autism or they want to sort of think about it from a business point of view, what are the kind of things or services that you can provide to help those businesses that perhaps are looking to get more of an understanding around autism?
I go into the workplace with a set of designed workshops geared up to what that employee is looking for. They might be, for instance, it could be a healthcare provider. Now they're looking to learn about autism a little bit more, get a deeper understanding. So I go in and I run the workshop, and it's not like anything a lot of other people do because of my background experience and all this sort of thing. So I do speak from a very personal point of view. As soon as I walk into a room, I've blown the myths away. Look, if you have an employees experiencing these difficulties, let's have a talk about how we can make life a bit more comfortable so that you get a better performance out of this individual. Because that's what people need to do. The best thing to do is for anybody, because I'm not a mind reader, and anybody watching this, they might have questions. I'm not even going to try and guess them. Pick up the phone or drop me an email and say, we really want to know more. We really want to know what life's like from a different angle. We want to know what we can do to support our employee. the first thing that goes through my head when anybody says that, how can we support this particular member of staff? I think, have you actually asked them? No, you wouldn't be picking up the phone to me if you haven't had that conversation. The first thing you do is speak to your employee. If they're not very great at one-to-one conversation, then exchange a few emails or have a video chat or something. But just say, look, we want to get the very best out of you. You are an incredibly talented person. And we can see there are certain areas that are a little bit of a problem. So let's how can we help? And I'm the second person to get in touch with. Please, never the first, unless you really want to, unless you're looking at increasing your workforce to include more autistic members of staff. But if somebody's getting in touch with me on behalf of a member of staff, please only do so after you've spoken to them first, because it's simply good manners.
I think that's a really powerful message, actually, a really good point, and perhaps a good point to end this this particular episode. Perhaps we'll carry this discussion on in a future episode. But I think what you're saying there is obviously, in the first instance, it sounds really obvious and really basic, but actually think, in the first instance about actually asking the employee or the individual and see what they can suggest. I think is your key point there.